Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Hello again, and I hope you're all well. So again, I'm transmitting from the monks' library in the Bhikkhu Vihara. It's snowing outside, and even more, the snow is melting. So I'm feeling quite sad right now. I don't know about you, but with all the COVID deaths, and one of our monks is in Texas, and his father and stepmother have the COVID. She's been admitted to the hospital, and Venerable Amasiri's uncle has died, and then a mentor's died, one in Delhi, one in Aurangabad. And then you see the images from Delhi or India or South America or anywhere really. It's a very, very heavy time for, I think, anyone. And I think we're all connected to someone who has lost someone or has had the COVID. So and sadness is actually, I think it's a good thing, not a happy thing, obviously, in that way, but because I think sadness is the deep feeling of compassion that we have for each other and for the human condition. And when something so vast as this strikes us, and we can't do much, we can do a little, and people are doing a lot, actually. I mean, as monks, we're very safe and secure, but I've been bringing up images a lot of the hospitals, and I saw some images from India and the hospitals, and how people are so horribly stressed out, and what can you do? Well, that the watching of news and the kind of horror of it all, if that's too much, we go into thought and we worry, where we just get very, very upset. And yet, allowing that imagery and that sense of the human frailty and human suffering to come into your heart is very important, isn't it? Because compassion is it's really the method that we use to go beyond ego, to go beyond selfishness. So compassion is the karuna. It's the motivator to help us to act. So we do what we can do in whatever way. And then we have our limits. So if we're a doctor in Emerge, I can't imagine how people can deal with that. It's just kind of beyond my imagination. I had one incident where my dad was dying, where it's a long story, but he was dying in Toronto of brain cancer. And when I finally got him to the hospital, I was with him the last month, I think, or 2 months or something. We got him to hospital. I had no real contacts in Toronto at the time, and my mother doesn't drive, so I just had to sort of get someone to pay for a taxi, and took the taxi to St. Joseph's Hospital. And when he arrived there, there were no beds in the hospital. And they were I think they were triaging people, and I think they just reckoned my dad was going to be gone in that night or something like that. But he was on a gurney in the hallway, and I wasn't getting much medical care. Everyone was stressed out. There were several people in the hallway, and I just had to do the best I could. I couldn't find even a pillow. And then his whole body started to get incredibly hot. And there was a sink nearby, and I just grabbed towels or wherever I could, and I just kept cooling him down. And he made it through the night. And then finally, I think my brother came and insisted on a room or something. He got quite vocal. I don't know. It was not pleasant. And so he got a room, and he lasted 4 more days. And I came out of that hospital that night. That it was an all-nighter for me. I was just absolutely whacked. I was just so tired. And so I bring that image up, and these doctors and nurses are doing this every day. I just, it's like unimaginable for me. So if I just constantly dwell on the stories of that, then I can get very upset. But if I just allow that sadness to just be part of my rest in my heart, shall we say? How do you say that? Because I tend to, I know life a lot through my body as well as through thought. So I know, like just Venerable Amritsari's uncle dying, it's really sad. It's sad for him. He's very close to him. And you could do the upeka thing, yes, that, well, he was old and he had to die. That's true. He had a good life, and we say those things, and they're true. But to actually, like, just allow sadness to be there and not think it's right or wrong, but to allow that deep, deep human sadness to touch you, and affect you in ways which are not just intellectual. Again, if I go to the story of a hospital in Brazil or in Delhi or somewhere, and I just keep bringing that up, then it's just a kind of horror movie, which doesn't really help. But I don't need that much imagery to come to compassion. And then from that, I can try to act, or at the very least, I can rest in that sadness. And that's different than indulging with thought in sadness and getting depressed, or thinking that I have to do something about sadness or distracting it, but actually making it fully conscious that human existence has a tremendous amount of sadness in it, that it's part of our human predicament. And it's neither right nor wrong. It's part of it. But so that we don't just kind of go into some kind of dismissive Buddhist line that, old people have to die, or that kind of dismissive thing, but that death for everyone is horrible, right? Whether it's my father dying or me watching my father dying, it's not easy for anyone, old people especially. And so I find if I just, like all day I've been not dwelling on, but being with, as I like to say, this natural sadness, then there's a kind of peacefulness to it. That life is this way, that loss is this way, and then I try to imagine these people in the hospitals. I just cannot, it's too big for me. So then taking that, contemplating that part of life, when life becomes just so difficult and so horrific, how do you deal with that? Well, the line that came to me contemplating that was that famous line of Ajahn Chah's, when you can't go forward, you can't go back, and you can't stand still. It was in a different context that he gave that teaching to Luang Por Viradhammo, but when you can't go forward, you can't go back, you can't stand still. Life sometimes is that way. You just don't know what you're gonna be facing next, how you're gonna handle it next. And then you see the only thing you can do is be present. That's your only choice, right? And it becomes like paramount and urgent that you do stay present, because you can't figure this out. This is bigger than, and you just stay present as much as you can and deal with things one at a time. And if I was an emerged doctor, I don't think I could do it. I'm sure I could, and I just don't have the nervous system for it. But we all, we face situations sometimes you just don't know how this is going to unravel, how it's going to resolve itself or how it's going to happen. And you just can't go to the future. It's because you just won't be able to figure it out. It's not calculable. And we're kind of, as a worldwide community, we're there now. So we get we get predictions about travel, and then we get predictions about second variant. And those are all the stories that we talk about. So we become experts on vaccines, and we have pro-vaccine people and anti-vaccine people, and then we have experts on. So it gets right into knowledge and information and that kind of thing. But the heart feeling what it feels is not really kind of information package. It's not kind of being hyper-informed about whether you get the Pfizer, the Moderna, or the, it's not about that. That's another thing. We do that, but to actually just abide with the feeling of deep sadness, and learn how to do that, and not go to thought, not in a totally permanent way, but learn how to abide with sadness. Then that to me would be the practice of karuna. That, I will abide pervading one quarter with the heart filled with compassion, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, above and below, around and everywhere, all into myself, abiding in compassion. And maybe that's the dharma, the profound dharma we can now. Not that we don't do this, right? I'm not saying that we understand this, but this is at such a profound level that we're kind of taking it so inwardly into, or at least I am, into my bones, and that maybe this will be of some benefit to humanity. This is what one hopes, because it does benefit humanity. The more we abide in that deep sense of compassion, we say, yeah, we're all in this. Like, this is. My mom feels this, your mom feels this, my dad, my brother, we all feel this. Then that really breaks down ego and selfishness and all those terrible things. It's sad to see all the blame that goes on, but I guess that's part of it too. I mean, these are very, very difficult situations. But then that necessity to be present. Now, where do we learn that? We learn that in the meditation, in the situations of life which are not fraught, don't we? Like when you're meditating on the breath or whatever. That's what we're doing. We're preparing for situations like that. Like, gosh, I hope we don't have to face those. But what other equipment do I have when life becomes so profoundly out of whack, right? So profoundly difficult. What resources do I have? I only have, as we say, my practice. And that's not selfish. That's centered. That's awake to the way things are. That's the ability to process emotion, to seclude oneself for a while and not to stimulate the mind, all of that. So these meditations that we have that Beat organizes, or I was with a group from Ireland at 4:00, and all these little efforts that we make as human beings to be more present, to be more mindful, is not just about like being careful and not spilling your soup, right? Much more profound than that. And if we've done that, if we've done the work of presence, then sometimes there is joy. Sure, there's beauty and there is the joy of people's wellness, right? And their success and their beauty and their accomplishments, and that's important too. But then this sense of compassion that we can have if we've learned presence and we've practiced presence, awareness with whatever you want. Then when life presents like that, then we can be present with sadness. We can be present with compassion. And we can motivate ourselves to do a little bit. So everyone tries. But deeper than that, we're really on the path of freedom from ego when compassion is really manifest. And the more we manifest the wholesome, as we all know, the more that echoes into the way we relate with each other and the way our mind gets formed into the future. Right? So now if we just kind of go into blame, that has its place. If people are corrupt or they're kind of, anti-science or all that kind of stuff, then maybe blame needs to be apportioned, or if they're just being foolish in some way. But that the blame game doesn't really bring compassion. It's necessary in like critiquing what we can do into the future, but one wants to be careful not to just dwell in blame, because that's very separative. That's very it's full of anger and aversion and self-righteousness, and that was so horrible to hear. And as this COVID thing opened up and people were just saying that that COVID is a scam or it's just a false news, it was just so I thought so arrogant to hear all of that. And one can kind of blame all of that, but then that doesn't take you to compassion. And that's when society just gets very argumentative, doesn't it? I'm right and they're wrong. And you get these kind of huge egotistical, dominant kind of beings that dominate us. But to go down that trail is to go down the trail of division. I was right, you were wrong, you were right, all of that. But compassion isn't a right or a wrong thing. It just accepts that the human condition is very, very, very painful at times, very, very painful. And then I think the skill to stay with that, to not think your meditation has to be somehow to change it to something which is more comfortable, but to not constantly go to thought. That's, I think, the great challenge, to take it to thought and to worry and do all of that is not compassion. It's worry. Worry is worry. Now, as practices, we can actually, we have these kind of constructed practices that we do. So we visualize beings who are suffering, and then we say, may they be well. But I think in this case, you don't really have to do that, do you? The visuals are there. They're just so very, very strongly. So I would suggest that, like, in your practice of breathing, really learn how to just rest in the heart a long time. And one of the things you find in resting in the heart, that why does the energy of your energy system, why does it get stuck in thought? Why does it do that? Why is that? And it happens a lot. And one of the things that is problematic is that the throat can be very, very contracted. And so, like I've never studied chakra meditations and so on. I have no formal knowledge of it. But I have found that when the throat is very kind of blocked or sort of like tight, that the meditation on breathing can be one where you actually meditate on the throat itself, not in any like particular point, but just to feel the musculature of your throat. And as you do that, and you allow your breath to not be too forced, what you find is you start to yawn. I've had, in kind of developing awareness of the throat, I've had sessions of meditation where I yawn for a whole hour. And, oh, come on, it's just like this great opening, the great opening. And then that begins to open up your chest. And then as your chest gets open, then the energy doesn't get stuck in thought. Thought comes and goes, but you see it as an object. But you start, your breath becomes more and open, and you begin to rest in the heart chakra and really experience what love is, and not sensual love, right? But that love we have for just being human, for being human, and that kind of openness that is possible. And I found that very kind of interesting to look at my own emotional life, not just through thought, because that doesn't really help me much. In fact, it hinders me because it just goes. So then to take feelings of like even the feeling, like a negative feeling that you have, like anger or fear, like when strong feelings come up, they're very, very useful if you allow them to be conscious through the body. Because if you feel fear, your heart chakra, your guts, your throat are really doing something. There's some energy going on. And rather than try to figure out the fear through the processes of worry, sure, you have to plan. See it as an opportunity. What's this energy system doing now? And it's really powerful, this fear, right? Or anger. Anger comes up. You really, you feel a lot of tightness here or in your stomach. And actually, it's very, very good because there's a lot of life going on there now. And if you allow yourself to make that your meditation, not these constructed things like may I be well, may you be well. They're all very, very well and good, but these very real life, visceral experiences where there's a real tearing of the heart, and do try to see what's your throat like. What does the throat feel like? And sometimes we have not learned how to kind of open up the whole system. And then you'll find that the whole breathing channel, right down to the hara, begins to have a lot of openness and vitality and relaxation. You start to feel a lot of relaxing. And then these profound experiences of sadness or compassion are allowed to be there in a way which is very actually nourishing. Compassion is a very nourishing feeling, not fun. Horror and just running in the storylines. Did you see what that was? And did you see that was? That's not really compassion, that's thought. Seeing it can lead to compassion, but actually allowing that to be as it is very nurturing to the heart. And lessening of fear, lessening of ego, that begins to fall away. So I know some of the people from Delhi might be on this podcast, or what are we on Zoom, this Zoom meeting, and so all of us, all of you folk in India, we really think of you and pray for you. And I don't have many contacts in South America, but I've heard that's very horrible. And all over the world, we do think of each other that way. We had the folk from the Aranya Trust had a meeting, a virtual prayer meeting that Deepti organized from Delhi, and we had it was very fascinating actually. We had our sangha here. There were four of us. We're chanting, and then we had a Jain monk who he gave some talk and he chanted, and there were two Parsi practitioners. There were a woman from Brahma Kumaris. There was a Catholic priest. Was he a priest? Can't remember. Anyway, he's from the Catholic tradition, I think, Christian tradition. There was a Sanskrit scholar. There was a Muslim representative. It was really very much India in that way. And we all tried to offer our little bit. And Deepti introduced this ecumenical prayer gathering by saying that, in India, we not only feel that the physical body needs healing, but also the spiritual body needs healing, and prayer and meditation and chanting have powerful effects in the universe. And so we joined in that, and that was really touching. So what can we do for everyone in the world? Well, we can be careful, follow the medical guidelines, get our vaccines or whatever, but we can also bring the heart to compassion and say, yeah, life is like this. This is what the Buddha was talking about. And sadness feels this way. And then that's peaceful. That's actually peaceful. If we can act, we act. If we can't, we can't. So allow yourself to feel sad, right? Allow that to be and then you'll find that softness just generates around your family, around your friends. So I think that's kind of all that's coming to mind just now. Maybe if there's any questions or comments.
We shall now chant the Anumodana. Shunxiang.
Thank you, Luang Por. Han
I shouldn't see.
tapayam o vadakatha sadhu kara kadama se sadhu 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 anumodami.
Thank you, Luang Por.
Yes.
Shall we open up the floor for questions and answers, Luang Por?
Please, yeah.
So thank you very much, the sisters in the Dhamma. You're now invited to ask a question from Luang Por. Please click on the raise hand button on the Zoom panel. Please note that this session is being recorded. By participating, you give consent for the use of your verbal and visual communications in this recorded session. All right. So if you click on the raise hand button, we will invite you to unmute. May we request that you keep questions short, clear, and to the practice so that we can get as many questions answered in this session as possible. Okay, we do have the first one. Veena, are you able to turn on your video? Veena, can you mute yourself?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. You are.
Yeah, there I am. Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Veena. Hi.
Hi. Just thank you for this very timely talk about COVID. I am originally from India. It's true that when I watch it, I've been profoundly sad. I cannot help feeling that this could have been avoided. How do you deal with that feeling? It is not one of righteousness, but a feeling that this is a man-made, so I don't know how to deal with that feeling of, there is a lot of anger, but we could have avoided this.
Yeah, I mean, at one level, that has to be dealt with, right? And if you have the power to deal with that and so on, but human societies have always had corruption and stupidity, even in the time of the Buddha. There's always been a lot of foolishness. So this quite often, and then this is so very complicated too, that the decisions are difficult. And I think our premier, our Ford, right? I think he was on television. Someone told me he was crying. Did you hear? And he made decisions which were marginally wrong, but he's doing his best. And he was so. I think just take responsibility for your own emotions, and realize that if you pursue negative emotions, even though they might feel justified, those negative emotions become more a part of your character. And this is the danger of being right about something that is wrong. That, okay, I can be angry about whatever, about what was done, but if I believe in that anger, I create a sense of self and other, and then that anger becomes more a part of my character. Now, having said that, anger is not wrong, and to call someone for being foolish, and to call them out if you have the power, if you're a journalist or you're in whatever situation, that's not a wrong thing, right? So it's not being a good Buddhist who never comments on these things. But if internally you're fuming with, oh, this shouldn't have happened, this shouldn't have happened, you have to go back, but it's like this. It has happened. And what's the best thing I can do as an individual right now with my family, my friends, or my communications, to bring as much wisdom to the situation as possible. Human ignorance is always here, isn't it? Human foolishness and selfishness and greed, hatred, and delusion. You know, the Buddha was talking about that. And in the Buddha's time, right, it was happening too. Like, think about Devadatta, you know, the Buddha's cousin. He tried to bump the Buddha off. You know, this is his cousin. He tried to kill the Buddha. So how dumb is that, right? So and that's bigger than politics. It's human ignorance, right? And then when it's manifest as politics, it's so painful to see, right? So do what you can, but do protect your mind. You know, like running with righteous anger or aversion is a kind of dangerous course, because it takes you away from the compassion of the heart. So not to be kind of naive and goody-good Buddhist to say this is wrong. That's fine. But then, what is your mind doing day in and day out? And if you're, I just read an article by Arundhati Roy on, I think it was in The Guardian, on corruption in India. That was very upsetting. You know, very upsetting to read that, and poor people. But if I allow that article to just seethe in my mind, I mean, I want to be informed about it, but if I just let that seethe in my mind, what's that going to do to me? It's not going to help me with my relationship with my friends in Delhi or whatever. And yet it does keep me informed to some extent to understand how difficult it is for them. Yeah? How difficult it is for me. And then I get a context. So that context helps me be less naive. But if I'm just carrying that, you know, with a kind of aversion and it's not right and so on, then how, you know, where's helpfulness? So how much should I be informed about these complex situations, and how much of it just becomes this need for to be hyper opinionated? This is a kind of a real ugliness now that you find in culture. People hyper opinionated. I know the truth, and this is the truth, and this is the only truth, and they become really oppressive, right? You find that, you know. So to be informed, yeah, but this kind of conceit of information that people have. I know all this and I know all that. I follow this website. I follow that website. That's not compassionate. It's egotistical, isn't it? So to be informed, and then to allow that information to take you away from being naive, but also to take you to more sense of understanding how difficult it is, and for compassion, to me, is the kind of way I try to operate. But sometimes, you know, I realize I don't need to know that much. I need to make sure that the heart has compassion and stillness. I try to find my own balance, you know, and as a monk, obviously we don't have television, so we have the internet. So we try to just, you know, be really moderate in that, and yet it be informed in some way. So Veena, you know, India is your country, but it's everyone's country, Mother India, right? And you know, I was kind of reborn in India I'm not a born again Buddhist, but you know, my interest there, and then the Buddha was born there, so I have a deep affection for India, and so that affection I tried to transmit into South America too. I don't know anyone in South America. But then the compassion of the heart. And then, you know, you even try to have compassion for people who are ignorant. You know, people who are making horrible decisions and foolish, you know, and to have compassion is much more difficult. It doesn't mean you excuse their behavior, you know. Inexcusable behavior is inexcusable behavior. His Holiness the Dalai Lama was in New Zealand when I was there. He was doing a tour, and I was part of the organization that welcomed him to New Zealand. And I've often talked about this, but he was on a talk show with the interviewer. He was a very, very acerbic, very aggressive man who no one really liked. I was surprised His Holiness was on that show, and the man asked him. He said, "So do you hate the Chinese for what happened in Tibet, the Chinese Communist government?" And he says, no, I have compassion. And the interviewer said, I don't believe you. Kind of dismissed them. His Holiness said, well, I don't forget what's happened in Tibet, but I don't hate them. I have compassion because that's my path, and that's the method, isn't it? To liberate. And they were, such an inspiring example that he understands, but he doesn't allow his heart to be poisoned by that. So why, be very careful. Be very careful about that. And if you feel like rage, then feel it. Go for it. Right? Like, feel the rage, swear a few times, not when your loved ones are around, and then let it be there. But then don't make that the place. Don't make that your refuge. See what I mean, right? So then, okay, I had to go through that. I've just absorbed this. I have to vent it a bit, and then don't let it rule your mind. And then say, yeah, all birth is difficult. Birth is difficult. And then hopefully that statement and that contemplation takes you to the Buddhist statement, there is the unborn. There is the uncreated, the unoriginated, and it puts urgency into your practice. This birth is valuable, and I have this chance to have the Dhamma, I have the situation, I have the intelligence. I'm going to really practice hard to realize the unconditioned. So it's a kind of motivator. So with compassion and that motivation, great things can be done. Okay, Veena. Are you
Thank
still
you,
up?
Luang Por. Thank you very much.
Are you still just above us?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm now in downtown Perth.
You're downtown Perth. Whoa.
Yeah.
Big city.
Yeah, big city.
Okay, Veena.
Thank
Hope
you,
we
Luang
see you
Por.
here soon. Namaste.
You too.
Namaste. Any others? Vita?
There are some typewritten questions. Please allow me to read them.
Please.
It says, there's a question which is, my adult daughter was diagnosed with a personality disorder where she interprets situations in the extremes, either perfect or horrible. Lately, she has been recalling events of her childhood, and her disorder interprets them as me being abusive towards her. No matter how I try to explain what happened, there is no changing her mind, so I let that go. This is still very painful for me because although I did make mistakes, I've always done my best to be a patient, loving, and caring mother. And I was certainly not an abusive parent. It is very painful to see her alter and rewrite the history of our mother and daughter relationship. What can I do to ease this pain the next time she recalls or reinterprets another childhood event as abusive? Perhaps I'm too attached to my good memories of my relationship with her. So this is one. Luang Por, there is also another similar question, but it is on the reverse, which is how to better understand a family member's mental difficulties and how to stay away from family trouble. How to make the mind stable of a 60-year-old COVID patient, as she is not a Dhamma practitioner. So there's this whole bit about family and mental instability.
B, to that question, the first one, we answered it last time with Ursula. Is this from last time? Or is Ursula asking that again? You're muted.
It's been asked again.
Oh, okay. Well, I answered that last time. So what was the second one again? I'm sorry.
How to understand family members' mental difficulties and how to stay away from family trouble. How to make mind stable of a 60-year-old COVID patient, as she is not a Dhamma practitioner.
Those are the $64,000 questions. There's no answers really, right? It's more that you have the resources to be present to the way things are, and then to respond from a place which is unknown. You can't figure life out that way, can you? You can only develop a capacity to know life feels this way, and keep doing that. It's like this. And then when the situation arises, rather than trying to figure it out, see if you can just be with it moment by moment, moment by moment. And one of the ways to do that is to have a lot of body awareness. So if a family member is experiencing COVID symptoms of derangement or something like that, who knows how to deal with that? There's no answer. There's no answer to that. But the answer is that if you've practiced presence and awareness, you'll know how you're reacting. You'll know if it's skillful or unskillful, and you have more chance of responding better. So I would say the best preparation for those things is to meditate, but not meditation as a separation from family problems, but as a preparation for them. So you create some period of seclusion if you can, and then that prepares you for entering into the complexity of family dynamics, right? And these things have no answer, but the answer is always presence, mindfulness, awareness, and a response from a good place. But you do need to regroup your energies. This is one thing. If you're not regrouping that capacity for stillness and silence, then you just start to run on automatic pilot, and you just get very, very reactive. So stopping, doing nothing, sitting in a chair, meditating for some period each day is very, very, very important. It's not just it's not a luxury, right? It's terribly important to do that, because that maintains the health of the mind, the stillness of the mind, the capacity to respond. Once the mind becomes reactive and exhausted, then, it just reacts to anger and fear, and it has no stability. That's why the meditation, the daily meditations are so very, very helpful. And then you find, you can go back to that. You can refresh yourself. You know you've got a place you can refresh yourself. And then you can kind of enter. But if you have no way to refresh your mind, it's very, very hard. So my answer to the question is, if you want to meditate, meditate. If you don't want to meditate, meditate. So there.
Thank you, Luang Por. I think your answer sums up the two other questions that are here. I'll read it out and you see if you want to elaborate, which is, how can I better practice the ability to see the light at the end of the tunnel of stuckness?
Say that again, please.
How can I better practice the ability to see the light at the end of the tunnel of stuckness? That means being stuck in a position or a corner. Then the second question, which is also similar, when we encounter conflict, how do we determine when to resolve it and when to let it go? Is letting go ever considered taking things lying down?
Okay, the first one is, are you stuck, or is stuckness an object in awareness? So that's the practice for that person. Ask yourself, are you stuck, or is stuckness a feeling in awareness? If you get the second, then that's the light, and you're out of the tunnel. If you think you are stuck, you'll be stuck there forever. So it's not the light at the end of the tunnel, it's turn on the light. Stuckness is a perception, it's an object in awareness. Lights on. I am stuck, lights off. Choose one or the other. And what was the second one? I can't, my memories, I've been talking all day. What's the second one?
The second one is, when we encounter conflict, how do we determine when to resolve it and when to let it go? Is letting go ever considered taking things lying down?
That's a huge misconception about letting go. Letting go is more awareness of the way things are. And so some people say letting be, but it's really awareness of the way things are. That's what letting go is. And what you're letting go of is the ego attachment to it. So when you feel conflict, or conflict's like this, that's what letting go means. It's awakening to conflict. It's not, and then what you can do or not do about the conflict depends on the social situation. So some social situations, there's conflict. You just have to bear with it. Some social situations, there is resolution. So you can't really answer that until you know the social context. But you can, I would say to the person, their idea of letting go is they need to investigate what they mean by letting go. The letting go is knowing. It's just knowing. This is a conflict. It feels conflicting, right? So then what people don't understand is that worry is not really dealing with a conflict. It's attaching to the conflict with the thoughts of fear. That's attachment. But knowing that there is conflict and feeling conflict and then making some move comes from the purity of awareness. So I would say to that person, what do you really mean by letting go? Because when you say that does letting go mean lying down, well, no, it doesn't mean that. Letting go is not a recipe for any social action. It's a suggestion to be present with a social conflict and then see what you can do. So go back to the drawing board for this question and say, well, what do you really mean by letting go? And do you have an accurate idea of that? This is what happens in Buddhist teaching is people hear something, they perceive it in a certain way, but it's not necessarily right view. But then they think it's the right view, and then they have this perception that letting go means lying down. So they've taken a teaching which is presented by someone, doesn't matter who, and the teacher might present it in a way which the student misunderstood. And then that misunderstanding becomes their grounding in wrong understanding, unfortunately. That's why you always have to kind of keep going back. Well, you hear one teacher, well, what does letting go really mean? So you question yourself. What does it really mean? What do they mean by that? Rather than, oh, I'm not letting go, I'm too attached. I'm kind of taking a kind of position that way. All right?
Luang Por. We have a friend from Ottawa, Nisanka and Hemanta.
Yeah, Nisanka, Hemanta, how are you? Nisanka was just here 2 days ago. Where are you? Hi, Nisanka, are you on?
Yes, I am on. I unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Are you well? I can hear you.
Yes.
I'm looking for you. I'm searching for you.
Yeah, I'm
nowhere. Oh yeah. Okay, I've got you. Please. How are you feeling?
I'm doing well.
How's the heart?
I think it's doing okay.
Okay.
I have to watch and see.
Niraso thinks you just drank too much tea. Anyway, what's your question?
The question is, I wrote it down, but I'll read it to you. Can
Please.
Luang Por give his reflections on how keeping precepts help in managing, reducing the spread of COVID? Similar things.
Say again, please.
Can Luang Por give his reflections on how keeping precepts help in managing, reducing the spread of COVID?
Well, I think you have to take a bigger view than precepts. You have to see it more as a Vinaya. Just as the monks have a Vinaya around how they live in the monastery, now the institutions of public health are recommending a Vinaya of what we should do. Wear masks, social distance, get vaccines. Okay, so that's the Vinaya that our best medical experts are giving us. And then we assess that, and I tend to trust the medical experts. I know Harini is on, so I ask her questions, and Ricini, I ask her questions. So I have confidence in the medical system giving me good advice. So then my Vinaya, so it's more than precepts. My discipline is to try to follow the recommendations that Ontario Public Health is giving, or that Harini is giving us, or Ricini, or so on. And that discipline then is very much like a monk's Vinaya, right? Like the way we live our lives is according to a set of standards set up by the Buddha and then practiced through the ages. So now we're getting a set of standards coming from scientists and public health, and a lot of them, you know, sometimes they're guessing, they're not sure, but it seems to me that the best thing I can do to protect those around me and to protect myself is to follow the guidelines, right? So when you came, you had to get a COVID test, and then you started to get symptoms, you left, you went to the hospital. That's what we're doing, right? And then we have two new friends have arrived in the monastery. One finished his 2-week COVID quarantine, and one did it at home. And then Rasa is very careful when he goes to Costco, and so on. So that's more than the precepts. This isn't about precepts. This is about a world Vinaya that we need to live by if we're going to protect each other, you know, from at least seems to me. And that's, so we just go by the Ontario health guidelines, and then some of the monks keep up on it. And Rasa is pretty good. I'm not very good, but then they tell me how we should operate, and we just keep to that. So in that way, it's straightforward. For us, we're lucky because we don't have to go to work. Work is here. And people come, and, you know, they offer dana, but only 2 or 3 can come in the room, and they make masks, and we open the windows, and so far so good. So it's more than the precepts are just a kind of general moral guideline to life, right? This is much more. You see, the Buddha didn't cover epidemics in his Vinaya, you know, or in the precepts. So precepts are just very, very basic. Okay? All right. Careful with the tea. We miss you. Be well. Okay.
We have the next person who would like to ask a question. Her name is Dawn Best.
Dawn Best, we hear you. Hi, Dawn.
Dawn, can you unmute yourself, please?
Where are you stationed?
I am on Adam Lake, just outside of Perth.
Oh, you're local.
Ontario. And I have visited your monastery.
Where's Adam Lake from?
Between Perth and Smith Falls.
Okay, all right.
And I
So
have
how
been
can I
to
help
your
you? What's the
monastery.
question?
I lost my husband in October
Oh,
after 44 years of marriage to heart failure.
uh-huh.
And then COVID arrived before that. I just want to thank you very much for all of the your advice around compassion and living with my emotions. I'm trying very hard to work through the grief process. I'm involved in a grief group in Perth by Zoom. And I just, it's not relieving very readily, but I guess what I'm hearing from you is that compassion for self without being egotistical is okay.
Well, they're very important. And you know, think about it, Dawn. How could it be otherwise? What you're feeling?
Yeah. Yeah.
Couldn't be anything else, really. 44 years?
Yes.
Huge, isn't it? Huge. I mean, it's unimaginable. Yeah. So it's not something, again, that you can figure out. But if you trust in openness and receptivity, then you'll find that the grief will take you to peace and a deep love that's already there, and that's why the grief is there. And just stay the course that grief is this way, as I've been saying.
Yeah.
And there was one. I'll tell you a story. There was a woman in New Zealand who she had a young family. So one of the kids was in high school, one was in college, and her husband was a doctor, and he had an aneurysm, and he was rushed to hospital, and they had him on a ventilator. And I was nearby, I rushed to the hospital too. And then we got, one of the daughters was in university, so we got the two daughters and the son, we were all there. And then because he was brain dead, they took the ventilator off and he died. And it was like, it happened within 18 hours. It was just so sudden, so unexpected. He was a healthy man in the prime of his career. And my friend, she would come to me whenever I went. This was in Auckland, but I was living in Wellington, and I would see her once a month. And she would come to me and she'd repeat the same story. I think for at least a year. I was just listening. And it was the same story, and the same story, the same story. And at some point it ended. Now, some of the people, I can't remember how long it took, and some of the people around her said, "You should get over your grief. It's too long now." And I said, "But why? Who has the ticket on the lifetime of grief? It has its own duration. Who knows how it should, And those recommendations I found actually to be quite cruel.
Yeah.
You should just, get married again, or silly things like that. But I just trusted her because she was a very wise woman. She is a wise woman. And knew how to practice. But the grief, went on, and we talked, and I heard the story, and I said, yeah, that was really heavy. And I empathized. I didn't say, "Oh no, there's that story again," because it was an original story each time she told me it. And I'm glad I did that, because I think I did think, "Oh, is she attached to this?" I said, no. It's just natural. And now she's she's a really bright and happy woman, and she honored that grief, I would say, right? She honored that relationship. And so you just stay the course, and the compassion is that openness to, this is painful. This is really, really painful.
Thank you.
And then when COVID's over and we all vaccine, come and visit. Okay, Don, be well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sadhu, we have one more. Luang Por. I'd like to invite Karen. Karen, are you there? Yeah, Karen, please.
Hi, Luang Por. Thank you for all your teachings.
Hi, Karen.
Hi. Luang Por, I have a question about prayer. I mean, a lot of your teachings are about being with the way things are. And I'm just wondering, is the power of prayer sentimental, or where does it fit in the entire scheme of things?
Well, it's certainly a sentiment, isn't it? So I suppose you're looking at is sentiment smarmy? Maybe that's it's how language. It's a sentiment that we feel for others, and we want to do something, right? I don't know. But I do know that metta bhavana, the way it's designed, is not prayer. Metta, like when metta bhavana is to irradiate the heart and mind with kindness, so that the heart isn't caught in the egotism of aversion or whatever. How that affects the world, whether it can be directed per se, is more like a tradition that exists throughout all cultures, right? And certainly people will inform me that they have felt things. Others will inform me that they've seen Ajahn Chah come to them, right? And now what's that about? I have no idea. So those kinds of questions I leave as mystery. And it's just great feeling to pray for someone, isn't it? And if I know someone's praying for me, I know for me it's a great feeling. So there's an effect. That's good. And then those larger questions, unless you are psychically gifted, and some small minority of people seem to be psychically gifted, we don't know. We don't know. So that, so the cynic says, it's sentimental nonsense, and another person says it's true. But I think you have just to be honest. Well, I don't know. That I don't know. But I do know that people ask me to do that, and I do it, and I feel good. They feel good, and also, like, what is consciousness? Is consciousness just behind my eyeballs, or is this whole experience in consciousness? Then you get to like a different way of looking at consciousness. But I find that trying to go to that with thought gets me into more doubt. But if I'm more with the heart, with compassion, and I just think of someone, I've been thinking a lot about my friends in Delhi, oh, may you be well, may you be well. I don't know what effect that has, but it certainly can't be bad, right? It can't be a bad thing. And we have that in our tradition, that the consciousness isn't just this, that it's a kind of, it's somehow this interchange or connection which is beyond our individuality. And then every now and then you meet psychically gifted people who talk about these things in very natural ways. Yes, this does affect us. Right? So I take it as a well, like Ajahn Amaro does it well. He says, why not take it as a working hypothesis that it works? Right? For those of us who aren't psychically gifted. Take it as a working hypothesis that it works. If someone says to you, I don't believe it, you say, well, it's my hypothesis. And I do it. And then that's good enough. And then you don't get caught up in all the argument and doubting about that. You just do it. Do it because it feels right. It feels good. But if someone says to you, it doesn't work, you say, fine, okay. That's your working hypothesis. Okay, good on you. May you be well.
Luang Por, can you elaborate a bit more on the difference between prayer and radiating loving kindness?
That would be prayer. To me, that would be prayer. So and what I try to do is first of all, I want to understand what metta is as a human feeling, rather than as a recitation of words and wordy imagery that is just a kind of Buddhist recitation. I want to know what love is as a visceral, embodied experience. So once I understand that, and I know that, then I will just bring in a name into that space. And then the rest is mystery. I don't know. But that's as far as I kind of take it. So I just like bring in the name and then let it sit in that space of kindness. And that's good enough for me. Beyond that, it just becomes intellectual. But I didn't, when I first started contemplating Metta Bhavana, I didn't like the intellectual recitations, the lists. And having said that, some people use them very, very well. But I found all I needed was one link to the feeling of loving kindness. And then I just tried to stay with that in my heart. So I would just use Luang Por Sumedho or my mom, and I just I would just imagine them, Luang Por, may you be well. And then I'd do that and get the feeling in the heart. That's enough, because it's the feeling in the heart that's important for me, not like the story I like to tell about my Sri Lankan friend in New Zealand who was doing Metta Bhavana. You probably heard this last time, but she was doing Metta Bhavana, and she thought that she had to cover all her family, and she had to give them equal time. Like everyone gets a present for Christmas. So I said, how's it going, Benita? She's got a big family. She's got a big family. And she said, it's really difficult. I run out of time. So she couldn't apportion. But I don't think it's that. I don't think it's really that kind of having to cover everything, because that gets very intellectual. But I think it is more like the heart being with that sensitivity, and then inviting energy, beings, whatever, into that. And so it's not intellectual in that way, for me. Other people do it differently, right? If you come from a Christian background, then prayer would have a different meaning, I suppose. So it's not a word I use that much. So it's not like something that is a big part of my vocabulary. Whereas if you read Thomas Merton or Prayer of the Heart in Christianity, it would be probably a more powerful word. They give you a more nuanced definition and explanation. Okay?
Okay. Thank you, Luang Por.
Okay, Karen. Thanks for the question.
Luang Por, we got one last question. Are you okay to take that?
Please do. Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to invite Malika from Brisbane. Could you turn on your video and unmute?
Where is she?
Malika?
Yeah.
It's a video.
Hi, Malika.
Hi, Ajahn.
How's Brisbane?
Good, Ajahn.
Okay.
Ajahn, I had surgery on the 28th. Just before I left the hospital, I wished you happy birthday.
Oh, yes, I remember. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm back home. Before I went into the theater, all I was asking, please give my life back to continue my Dhamma practice, and was sending metta to all the doctors and nurses and myself. I'm in pain and weak, but I think of the fact I'm back. Is it a good way to be grateful?
Very important.
Yeah, thank you, Ajahn. Yeah.
Gratitude is liberation.
Yeah.
If you're grateful, you don't feel desire. And the end of desire is liberation. So well done, Malika. Welcome back.
Thank you, Ajahn. Yeah.
Okay. Be well.
Thank you.
How are we doing, Bita?
We're doing well. There are no more questions, but perhaps there's just one request from someone asking, how can we share the precious Dhamma teachings to our parents, Luang Por? Perhaps this is a very nice ending for today's session.
Well, you share the practice through your being rather than through your words. And I would think that one's parents, the most important thing for them is that you're happy, that you're well in yourself, that their life has been meaningful because your life is meaningful. And so if you can come to that space of personal fulfillment, not in an egotistical way, and relate to them from wellness, then they're going to read that in a way which is optimistic and fulfilling. And yeah, I've done my duty. I've cared for my children. Now, if they are reflective, and they have a reflective mind, then you might be able to share Dhamma with them. But if they're not reflective, then you don't want to preach, because nothing is more offensive to a parent than a child preaching at them, I'm sure. I don't have kids, but you want to, you want to be open to who they are in that moment rather than who you want them to be in that moment. And quite often we see maybe our parents getting upset or something and you think it's unnecessary and we try to talk them out of it. You don't have to do that, Mom, just be mindful. And that can be kind of patronizing and lacking compassion. I don't know where the person is coming from, but first and foremost, in talking to anyone, you have to listen to them and find out where they're at right now. And if they're at some troubled place, can you just shift their attention to something untroubled rather than give some discourse on being untroubled? And like one of the stories, when I was taking care of my mom, she loved flowers, but she had had a garden for 20 years. She had this terrace on a 4th floor of her condominium. And, monks don't do gardening, but I thought I could do some potted plants for her. So I created this lovely garden, and my record was about 65 potted plants, which was just beautiful, lovely. And I would bring my mom out there, and I would allow her just to see the color and the shapes and the smells, and that brought her to joy. And I realized that was better than preaching about how to be happy. I had to do something physical to help her bring her mind to some sense of upliftment. And that was Dhamma for her. She was plugging into the reality of joy, the reality of beauty, and that got her away from the negativity of an old body and a lot of pain. So there's many ways to teach Dhamma. It's not about words all the time. It's about feelings and expression and distraction, even wholesome distraction. We had a monk here who was very, very intellectual and thinking all the time. And I tried to take him on walks and say, hey, look at the bird. And I'd get him out of his mind for 10 seconds. And then he'd be, and then I'd say, look at the water. He'd say, oh, yeah. And then, so it was hard work. But you could see it wasn't like he was so into his head. He didn't need words. He needed color or light or something different. And those ways of teaching Dhamma come from a true connectedness to a parent. And if a parent is just like really negative and critical and angry and so on, they have to be very patient, very, very patient, and somehow try to lead them out of that, get them out of that. And that can be very difficult. And then if someone has dementia, then it becomes a kind of, you have to see, well, this isn't the real person now. The mind is taking a different direction. And then there's a different kind of patience involved there.